It's Adam here for PC Monitors, and today I'm going to be taking a look at the Osd on-screen display menu system of the Samsung S27E650C. The Osd is controlled by tactile buttons towards the right side of the bottom bezel. Each button's labelled with its function. There's also a power LED at the end there, a little illuminated blue power symbol to show that the monitor's switched on. If you press any of the buttons here except for the down arrow there, a little quick menu pops up, and that shows you what each of the buttons will do if you press them again. So the first button there will go onto the main Osd menu. The up arrow there allows you to quickly adjust basic functions of the monitor, such as the brightness, the contrast, and the volume of anything connected to the 3.5mm headphone jack. There's a quick source select button. If you press that, it just cycles through the monitor sources. And there's also a dedicated iSaver button here, which activates the iSaver mode. Now, this is something that I talk about in the review. It's a low blue light setting, but it also massively reduces the contrast of the screen, which is designed to decrease the amount of time your eye spends adjusting to light levels, assuming you have quite a stable sort of lighting environment. I discussed that in a bit more detail in the review. It does massively kill the contrast, which is sort of the main key advantage of this monitor really, so do think carefully about enabling that. It also, as I mentioned in the review, this monitor does actually use PWM pulse width modulation below a certain brightness level, and if you enable the iSaver mode you can't adjust the brightness, and it does actually take it below that brightness threshold. I'm not sure if you can pick up a bit of flickering on the camera here, but that's something to bear in mind, because if you want the monitor to remain flicker free you have to have the brightness a bit higher than that. And there is an alternative low blue light setting which I'll come on to in a minute, which you can use. But the main menu, it's set out in Samsung's usual modern style. I'm just going to reduce the brightness a bit so you can actually see the different elements and they're not completely bleached out on the camera. Again, you'll probably see a bit of flickering on the camera here because I've reduced the brightness enough to enable PWM on the monitor, which isn't exactly a desirable thing. But you can see the first menu here is picture, and that allows you to select one of the magic bright image presets, adjust the brightness. As I do, I'll just increase this a bit to try and see if I can get rid of that flickering. I know that might start annoying people. You can adjust the contrast, the sharpness, and as usual it tells you on the right side here what each function actually does, which is quite useful. There's a colour menu which allows you to manually adjust the red, green and blue colour channels, or alternatively select a colour tone preset. So the alternative low blue light setting I was talking about, warm 2, you can select that here, and that doesn't reduce the contrast to the same degree as iSaver mode, and you also have full control over the brightness, so you don't have to have the monitor flickering as well. And there are also 3 gamma settings you can use. There's a magic upscale function, and it says here enhance picture detail and vividness. What that actually does is it purposefully over sharpens the image. It can be useful if you're running the monitor at a lower than native resolution. For example, if you've got it connected to an older games console that's say running 720p or something like that, then you might want to enable this. And mode 1 has a fairly gentle sharpening effect, whereas mode 2 is a much stronger sharpening effect. But for general PC use, or when you're using the native resolution, I'd really recommend just keeping that off. There's an HDMI black level option, which is greyed out because I'm using DisplayPort, and that will enable, you can basically select a normal or a low HDMI black level, and if you look at our article on correcting the HDMI colour signal, it goes into more detail about that kind of thing. There's another way of accessing the iSaver mode. There's also a game mode, which I talk about in the review, and I don't really want to discuss in too much detail here, or any detail in fact, because I really don't like it very much, and it doesn't really do much to enhance the gaming experience in my view. There is a response time setting, which you can set to standard, faster or fastest, and a picture size option, which is useful if you're running the monitor at a non-native resolution that happens to have a different aspect ratio, and you want to either have it so it fills the whole screen or it gives you some black borders. But obviously, as a PC user, you can just get the GPU to control that kind of thing as well. There's also a screen adjustment thing, which is greyed out there. That's because it applies to VGA connections, analog connections. It's not something that you can actually adjust with digital connections, because it's all optimized for you automatically. Next up is on-screen display, and that allows you to change some basic features of the OSD itself. You can enable or disable a little transparency effect there. You can change where on the screen the OSD is displayed, change both the horizontal and vertical position. And you can change the language of the OSD. There are various options there. I'm not going to go through them all, and I'm not going to accidentally select one that I don't understand, because that wouldn't be very good. And finally, on this menu there is display time, and that it's explained quite well on the menu itself. Set how long the menu window will remain on screen for when it is not in use. So you can set that to 200 seconds, 20 seconds, 10 seconds or 5 seconds. Next is a system menu, and the first option on there is Smart Eco Saving, and all this does is it will set the monitor to a preset low brightness level. It doesn't do anything you can't just achieve with the by lowering the brightness control. I did initially think it might be a sort of dynamic contrast mode to that selects a slightly higher brightness if bright content's displayed, but without going crazy like the main dynamic contrast feature of the monitor. But it doesn't seem to be, or at least it seems to use very low brightnesses, ones that will also cause the monitor to flicker, the backlight to flicker, because they're under 30 or 31 on the OSD, or they would be. It's not a particularly useful feature, but there if you want to have a play with it anyway. Timer Plus, and that has two different modes, or two different aspects I should say. There's the main off timer, and I think this is set to 4 hours by default, so one of the first things you might want to do is turn this off, but all it does is it just gives you a little reminder on the screen when you've been using the monitor for a preset amount of time. You can set it between 1 hour and 23 hours, and after that time it'll just give you a notification on the screen saying that it's going to turn itself off unless you press one of the buttons on the OSD. So basically, if the idea is if you're not using the monitor, you won't press one of the buttons on the OSD because you can't, and it'll turn itself off, or turn itself on standby. So before I forget, I'm just going to turn that off. There's also an eco timer function, and what this will do is when the monitor is not displaying a signal, is not detecting a signal, sorry, for example if you've turned your PC off, the monitor will automatically turn itself off, as if you've pressed the power button, but even if you haven't, after a preset amount of time. And you can set that between 10 minutes and 180 minutes. So that is quite a useful feature, really. I mean, I tend to just turn the monitor off whenever I'm not using the computer, so I don't really have a need for that, but I'm sure some people would appreciate it. There's PC/AV mode, and this enlarges the picture slightly. If you select AV mode, it's something that you might want to do for older games consoles or certain devices like that, but most modern devices, modern PCs, modern games consoles, they'll work best in PC mode. They basically are like little PCs, modern consoles anyway. There's source detection, and you can set that to manual if you want to manually select which source the monitor is using, which could be useful if you've got multiple things plugged in at the same time. You can change the key repeat time, which is just how the, as it says there, how the buttons of the OSD actually respond when they're pressed. And there's an option there to reset everything to the factory defaults. Finally, there's a little information section, and that tells you some basic information such as the model number or the extended model code. In this case, that's not the preferred model code, which is just S27E650C, but it's the full whack there, LS26E65KCS/EN, and that'll change slightly depending on the region as well. There's a serial number, how you've got it connected, the current refresh rate, and the optimal refresh rate and resolution as well. So there you have it. That was the OSD on-screen display menu system of the Samsung S27E650C. Be sure to check out the full review on PCmonitors.info.